Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, First Latina Bar President. In today's episode, we're doing something a little bit different. We've partnered with the National Conference for Bar Presidents to do a series of interviews with bar leaders from around the country here in Louisville, Kentucky. So I'm happy to introduce you to all of these leaders that you might not know because they're not from Austin. Carl Smallwood is the director of the Divided Community Project at Moritz Law School. The DCP is committed to the belief that dispute resolution practitioners, policymakers, and scholars can make a tangible, constructive contribution to helping leaders in communities seared by tensions, unrest, and civil discord to strengthen and expand their capacity and resiliency. He was the first Black partner at Voorhees, Sater, Seymour and Pease, LLP, where he worked for over 38 years. Carl was the first African-American president of the Columbus Bar Association, president of the Central Ohio Association of Civil Trial Attorneys, and a former president of the National Conference of Bar Presidents. Carl also served as a founding president of the Law and Leadership Institute, LLC, a diversity pipeline program for underserved high school students created by the Ohio Supreme Court, the Ohio State Bar Association, the 9 Ohio law schools, and the Ohio Center of Law-Related Education. Carl was also named the inaugural winner of the Ohio State Bar Foundation Excellence in Diversity and Inclusion Award and a champion of diversity by the Ohio Super Lawyers magazine. Carl is a graduate of Ohio State University and the Ohio State University Moritz College of Law. I'm honored to have with us today Carl Smallwood. Well, Carl, thank you for being here. And I want to start at the beginning. Why did you want to be a lawyer?
I wanted to be useful. I wanted to make a difference. I participated in some things in high school and college, debate, and developed some skills that I thought would be useful. And mostly I wanted to make a difference in terms of justice for people. Martin Luther King Jr. talks about the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I wanted to have a hand in bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice.
My goodness. I think that's going to be our hashtag, bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice.
Well, okay, it's a lofty aspiration.
But it's a good one. The premise of this podcast is Council of Firsts, where we celebrate firsts in legal positions. And you are the first African-American president of the Columbus Bar Association. But that comes with some burdens because if you're not a great first, maybe there won't be a next. So tell me about your experience as the first.
Yes, I was the first African-American president of the Columbus Bar Association in 2000, elected in 2000. And I think you're right in saying it comes with a few extra burdens. But I'll explain what I mean by that. There had been Black members of the board of governors of the Columbus Bar Association for years before I saw it off. And some of them were people I looked up to. And I wonder, well, why did none of them run to be president of the bar? And who am I? If they didn't do it, who am I to be president of the bar? And fortunately, one of those folks came to me and said, you should run. It's time. And I did and was elected. One of the African-American judges in Columbus, Ohio said, it doesn't matter who's first, just that they're not the last.
Mm-hmm.
And that I thought was a really important point. And so as I was trying to get ready to be president of the bar and then discharging the duties of the office, I absolutely agree with you. I think you want to make sure it's done right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was told, oh, you don't have to do 100% for everything you get ready for. And I thought, well, the first time I do this at 80% and it fails, isn't somebody going to say, well, that's what we thought. He wasn't ready. So, I think for the most part, I try to do things at about 110%. People appreciate enthusiasm. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, try to do it right so that I wouldn't be the last. And I wasn't. I mean, there have been a number of lawyers of color, a number of Black lawyers who served as president of the Columbus Bar Association since 2000, and I'm really proud of what they have done in that office and what other presidents of the Columbus Bar have done in that office.
Well, tell us about your day job at the Divided Community Project.
The Divided Community Project was begun in 2015. It is housed at the Moritz College of Law at The Ohio State University. The College of Law is a U.S. News and World ranked #2 program in dispute resolution in the country. And two of the founders of the Divided Community Project are emeritus members of that faculty, Nancy Rogers and Josh Stolberg. And they gathered together dispute resolution practitioners, advocacy group leaders, law enforcement, municipal leaders, and others in 2015 to take a look at what was happening in communities around the country, particularly after police-involved shootings, uses of deadly force, and things like that. And at the first conference was looking at actually what happened in Sanford, Florida, after Trayvon Martin was shot and killed in February of 2012. Now that wasn't a police killing, but it was a young African American 17-year-old. And they looked at what happened in Sanford after that event, national and international attention, mass protests, 30, 40,000 people coming upon that community. It did not result in the kind of destruction or arrests or after effects that occurred in Ferguson after Michael Brown was killed, or in Baltimore after Freddie Gray was killed. And so the question was why? And they looked at that example, and at the conclusion of the conference, they raised the question, is there a role for people who do dispute resolution, who do conciliation in communities, to assist communities in the aftermath of these kind of events and with tension that's caused by other reasons? Answer was yes. The Divided Community Project was born, and we exist to help communities that are divided racially, religiously. Now political polarization is big, gender identity, and other reasons that people are divided. And to try to help those communities design dispute resolution processes that will help them bridge those differences. We have what we call the Bridge Initiative, which helps communities in real time. It is a direct consultation and intervention service. Two of the former members of the U.S. Department of Justice Community Relations Service work with us to help communities around the country. The Community Relations Service is called America's Peacemakers. They're the ones who sort of parachute into communities after events occur to help communities. And our Bridge program is modeled exactly on that. We provide those services upon request and at no charge to the community. It's all funded by foundation. In addition to that, we teach academies, and what we try to do is to translate some of the lessons of communities that are successful in addressing tension into guidance that community leaders can use, written guidance. So, but not written for other lawyers, really written for community leaders and faith leaders and law enforcement leaders and others.
Since dispute resolution needs two parties that want to resolve a dispute, have you ever had a situation where you want to help, you see the need, you see the service that you can provide, but the parties aren't ready?
Almost exclusively. As I said, we help upon request. It usually is the request of one party or some individual or group of individuals in a community that reach out. Quite often, some other parts of the community are not ready to have that conversation. I mean, consider most recently the conflict in the Middle East, in Gaza, and in Israel. And at the moment, there are communities that aren't ready to talk about any kind of a resolution there. And at this point, as we've begun to sort of lean into that space to help campuses and students on campuses, it really is about providing support to each other. At this point, it really is sort of trying to make it safe for students to talk to each other across those differences, because you've got Muslim students and Palestinian students and Jewish students and students who don't belong to any of those groups or identities, who are afraid, who are in pain, and as part of a community, a law school community, a college community, you need to be able to support each other, or at least we want to be in a position where you can reach out and say, is there something we can do to support you? So it's often the case that you don't have two parties who come to you as they do in civil litigation
Right.
sometimes because the judge said, "Hey, go talk to an arbitrator or a mediator." This is much more the circumstance where you gain entry into a community because you've been invited there by a stakeholder in the community, and then you begin to reach out and determine and assess whether it's possible to engage people in conversation. Sometimes it begins and it's not direct conversation, it's indirect, it's through a intermediary. Um, and you're able, hopefully, to make some progress to help with the conflict they have.
So, with all that you've seen in your career and now at the law school with the DCP, do you think the legal community is on the right track towards being more diverse, equitable, inclusive?
You know, I graduated from law school in 1980. So I was in law school um, back during one of the early Supreme Court decisions related to affirmative action in higher education. And I guess my career has now been long enough that I've reached the most recent with the students for fair admission. Um, I think the profession understands the importance that the legal community reflect the broader society that they serve. Um, and and so I think we are on the right track. Um, and the question really is, the pace at which we are going, and whether some of the progress that has been obtained, which at this point means that approximately 15%, 14% of the profession is lawyers of color. Um, whether the progress towards having a greater percentage of lawyers of color in the profession will continue. And I know that over the years, um, the reason this is so important was brought home by a former Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court to us, who said, the authority of the legal community is grounded in the trust of citizens that we will fairly and efficiently address their needs, help settle their disputes, and uphold the rule of law. And that is made possible only because of the trust and respect that the citizens have for the profession. In that regard, the profession must reflect the society. And if it does not, then it will not have the legitimacy among the broader population that it requires. And an example simply would be if you're in a courtroom and you're a cat, and everybody else in that courtroom is a dog. The lawyers are dogs, the bailiff's a dog, the judge is a dog, the juries are a dog. You're not going to believe you're getting a fair trial. And I think that it's, as a result, important that when people come to our courthouses, when they come to our, the places where we dispense justice, not justice because you think it's justice, but justice because, in fact, an impartial party has heard and considered the evidence and has applied both moral and ethical judgment with respect to the evidence, and then renders a verdict or a judgment, a conclusion. They do so reflecting, in fact, who's out there. And if nobody looks like the people who are coming before the courts, I don't think that's possible. It doesn't generate trust in the system.
Well, and speaking of rule of law, that is a topic that you are an expert in. I will say that. You don't have to say that. I see you making a face.
Okay.
I'll say you're a scholar in. But sometimes when we say phrases, rule of law, democracy, free and fair elections, those innocuous words are scary to people and controversial to people. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's lack of understanding. I mean, we haven't really spoken about those terms. Even within the legal profession, we sometimes bandy about those terms, but we don't define them. And you say I'm a scholar and an expert, and I think that overstates probably what I am, because I know, as I've looked at the question of, what what actually makes up the rule of law, it is more complex than simply saying the rule of law, and we all understand that. But having systems that um, have impartial parties that dispense justice without favor based on income or origin or influence is critically important. And as I said, this is the part that's hard, because even when you talk to somebody who's sort of in this area, there are definitions for some of these terms, and the World Justice Project, for example, ranks countries by whether they have effective democracies and how the rule of law is working in those countries. And they have, a series of 6 or 8 criteria that describe what would be more democratic, what would be more just, and you can measure those and use those metrics to determine how a country is doing. Well, as they've done so over the course of the last number of years, the what we think of as probably the shining city on the hill, the United States democracy and system of justice, seems to be slipping in terms of how those metrics show up in our country. And that's unfortunate. And it's largely a result of our not emphasizing education with respect to civics, with respect to the importance of democracy and the rule of law. And so we may have an opportunity to try to correct that in the future. We spent a lot of time and money on STEM education,
Hmm.
which is really important. But it's also important to talk about civility and civics and how our system works, to try to be fair to everybody who becomes part of the system. How people's um, right to vote is not abridged, and how it is then effectuated in terms of electing people as a result of their exercise of vote.
Well, looking from the outside, there seems to be an interesting shift because the American Bar Association has always been interested and committed to the rule of law,
Yeah.
but it seems like it had been external to other countries. And now, because of the right to vote, we're coming back to us, in a sense.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just the right to vote. It is also because um, there are a number of factors that over the course of the last decade or more have begun to undermine trust and confidence in democracy in this country and in the application of the rule of law in this country. And political polarization has driven us apart in some respects. Elected officials, unfortunately, have undermined confidence in our institutions, in the impartiality of our judges, in the ability of our justice system to deliver accountability. Um, and as a result, you've got a circumstance now where the populace doesn't have the same confidence and trust in our systems as they once did. Social media is a factor. Social media, not simply by people in this country who are uh, repeating or spreading things they find amusing but are untrue, um, but foreign actors as well, who have an interest in seeing us weakened, and having us with internal conflict. And as a result, I think it really is up to the lawyers. I mean, the reason you see American Bar Association involved in this, and you see the Columbus Bar Association and the Austin Bar Association and others involved in this, is that we have the responsibility as lawyers, first and foremost, to defend the Constitution and the rule of law in this country. We have an opportunity to do so, and it's our challenge to help restore public trust. And so that's why you see us working so hard at it.
And I know that you winced when I said it earlier, but this is what makes you sound like a bit of a scholar and an expert on this topic.
But I think we all are, and I guess one of the areas I mentioned to you, the Divided Community Project, does a lot of work relating to division on race, religion, and other things. As we turn to political polarization, we looked at what role lawyers and citizens and others could play in helping democracy. And our process at the Divided Community Project is to gather together uh, uh, broad groups, in this case, a bipartisan group or a cross-partisan group, depending upon how you want to describe it, of elected officials, historians, political scientists, faith leaders, advocacy group leaders, and elected sort of at every level, state, local. Um, they raised the alarm that, in fact, democracy was in peril. And they identified ways that we might speak out to help the country currently. So I mentioned we published guides. We published a guide called Speaking Out to Strengthen the Guardrails of Democracy. Maybe you can throw a link in the show notes. It would be great. But it had, examples of ways to speak out and suggested, for example, that finding ways to speak in a bipartisan way. Examples for example of candidates from both parties saying we have enough faith in the election system here that when this race is done, whoever wins is the winner, and you as a voter can have confidence in that. And I mean, again, that's a way of speaking to the concerns, the lack of trust that citizens have, and making them feel like the system actually does work. And then, of course, there's another part about once you are governing so that the public feels it isn't just the voters that voted for me, but I have a responsibility to the community is important as well. But I think the first thing we did was to talk about how to speak out to help democracy, and then I guess more recently the American Bar Association created a task force on American democracy and an advisory commission to the task force, and I chair the advisory commission to the task force. So,
You continue to prove my point, sir.
well, you know, but I guess I would want your listeners to know that the task force is sort of this well-known group of officials and others, again, bipartisan, who find common ground in urging Americans to support democracy. The advisory commission is made up of state, local, national bar association leaders, of the ABA's committees, divisions, section leaders. It's basically the legal community writ large, and 30 of us who basically are geographically spread across the country are creating opportunities to connect with state, local, national bars, because our goal is to inspire and mobilize America's duty-bound legal profession to actively support and defend democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law. And again, there's a the show notes. You can drop a link to that. I mean, there are resources there, but for any bar leader in the country who has a willingness to live up to the oath that they took when they entered this profession, we have got ways that we think they can speak to the legal community first, and then to the public, because ultimately it's the public's confidence that matters the most. I think we as lawyers at times are used to having opposing ideas, and we're comfortable with that. Um, and at times it's important to call out opposing ideas that really aren't helpful or reliable. or factual. Um, and when the public sometimes sees two lawyers arguing, they think, well, they both they I think they read too much into that. And if they could talk to the lawyers separately when they're not, sort of have a microphone in their face, they might both say, "Here's what we can agree upon." And you should take confidence that this system permits us to disagree this way. That's a good thing. But we have to agree on other things, and one of the things we can agree upon is that certain parts of the system work exactly like they're supposed to, and they will deliver, um, what you would expect the system to deliver. So in voting, for example, or in other aspects.
Well, and speaking of lawyers collaborating together, you're a past president of NCBP.
Yeah.
What does NCBP mean to you?
Well, I mean, as the National Conference of Bar Presidents, I
Yeah.
guess and I don't know if all of your listeners know exactly what that is, but it is a group of state, local, and national bar leaders. Um, uh, I first became a member when I was in the ladders to become president of the Columbus Bar Association some 20 some years ago. But I've remained involved in the National Conference of Bar Presidents since then, because is it was a source of strength and inspiration for me when I was a bar leader wannabe. That there were bar leaders who'd gone before who said, "Here are the issues that you need to be aware of. We're not going to tell you what to do. You figure it out, but there are resources. There are calm heads. There are, ears that will listen. We're going to connect you with a group of lawyers around the country who are facing the exact same issues in their communities. We want you to get to know them. We want you to be resources for them." And what I've developed is lifelong friends over 20 some years of being part of the National Conference of Bar Presidents. But so what it means to me is it is a nationwide network of committed leaders. They support each other. They train the next generation of lawyers. They are some of the best and brightest lawyers in the country, and many of them have become lifelong friends.
I was chatting with someone earlier, and I described that my first executive council meeting at NCBP felt like I walked into an AP class because it was the leaders of leaders, the leaderiest leaders that you know, all in one room working together for a common goal. And so I had not seen that before. And so congratulations to you for being part of that and to NCBP in general for existing and continuing to model the way, because I think that's how everybody feels that ends up as part of this.
I think it is so important. You mentioned that I was the first African American president of the Columbus Bar Association, and I know the difference between being second or third, and I know that most of the things that I've done in this profession, including being president of the Columbus Bar, there are others who went before me, who blazed the trails, who we used to say sort of, built fires that I was warmed by, and I think it's important to continue to do that. Those of us who've had our turn as president of the bar need to continue to do that for the next generation coming up, and then give them their turn.
Mhm.
I mean, believe me, I'm happy to get out of the way, and let somebody else have a turn. But most of us stay involved and then try to make sure we're reaching back to sort of give folks a hand up. Um, and, because all of the work we do is designed to help the communities where we live. And whether you were a state president or a local president or a national president, the rubber hits the road in communities all over this country, some of which are really struggling right now with a lot of division. And bar presidents are in a position to be important, helpful, constructive members of those communities. That's what I'd love to see. And if there's anything I can do to support that, I'm available. And you'll put my email in this show notes as well. So,
People are going to be calling you.
I hope so, because it means people are thinking about how to solve problems. That's why we all went to law school. Um, That's what we do on a daily basis. And as I said at the beginning, in some respect, the hope is we're doing something useful. Um, if the arc of the moral universe is long, and it certainly is, the only reason it bends towards justice is because people are applying their hands and their shoulders and their labor to it. And that's what I'd like to be a part of when it's all said and done.
What advice would you give to lawyers who want to follow in your footsteps?
Lean in, lean in. There are opportunities available for you. And when you get an invitation to join something, to go to a bar association meeting, to lead a committee, to work on an event, lean into it. The same way you lean into learning your craft as a lawyer. I was a trial lawyer. The same diligence that you apply to getting an examination of a witness right, or crafting an opening statement, or picking a jury, or anything else. Apply the same diligence to the work you do in the profession. This profession matters. It matters not only to the lawyers who benefit from the profession, it matters to the public that we serve. So lean into it. And again, my guidance is, don't bring 50%, bring it all. Bring it all. And, everything you do isn't going to work. That's okay. You'll learn from it and we'll do better the next time. And take advantage of the people who are around you who are willing to be helpful. You need mentors, you need champions, you need friends. And this profession has got all of those. So, my guidance is get involved.
Well, I think we've ended with a more concise hashtag than at the beginning. Your hashtag now will be This Profession Matters.
Fair enough.
So thank you for being with us today. I think this has been an exciting discussion that the audience is going to love.
Amanda, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.